What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the E4 Explicit Podcast. I'm Corey, and today we have journalist Diane Dimond. Some of you may have seen her on TV back in the day. She's the first one to break the Michael Jackson sexual assault and child abuse allegations back in the 90s. She was also the very first reporter on scene at the Nicole Brown murders. That's O.J. Simpson's ex-wife that he didn't murder. So she's seen some shit, and she's been around the block. She's investigated every high-profile case you could possibly think of, which is what we dive into on this episode. So enjoy this one. It gets fucking crazy. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell notification so you get notified every single time I post new content to this channel. Also, drop a comment below if you're enjoying the content. If you'd like to see me interview somebody else that you have in mind, drop that in the comments below and I'll reach out to them and hopefully get them on the show. I really appreciate it, and enjoy this episode for the E4 Explicit Podcast with Diane Dimond. See you next time. All right, guys. Well, welcome back to another episode of the E4 Explicit Podcast. I'm Corey, and today we have investigative journalist Diane Dimond. So some of you might have grown up watching her actually on TV and stuff like that, and reporting on the news. I know I've seen you before. Even before I saw you in the documentary, I saw you on the Epstein doc, and I was like, holy crap, like she looks super familiar. And I like looked you up. I'm like, oh my God, like I've seen you like break a ton of stuff.
I can't believe it.
Right. Right. So thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. If you could just give everybody kind of like a background, a quick synopsis of you, that would be amazing.
Sure. My name is Diane Dimond. I hail from Albuquerque, New Mexico, but I have lived all over the country. From Albuquerque, I went to Washington, D.C., where I worked for National Public Radio. I did the newscasts on All Things Considered. And I was in radio for many, many years. And then radio was disintegrating, so to speak. Radio news departments were dismantling. And I thought, well, if I'm ever going to get into TV, I better try before I get too old, you know. So I applied all over the place. And my first TV job was CBS in New York. So that was quite a leap for me. I look back and I wonder, how the heck did I do that? Right. But from syndicated television, used to work for the TV show Hard Copy. Moved to Hollywood, California with my husband to do that. Most of the 90s I was there. I came back east at the end of the 90s, and I co-anchored a newscast with Geraldo Rivera at CNBC. It was called Upfront Tonight. And it was great. It was sort of a jazzy sort of millennial type newscast. You know, it wasn't the Walter Cronkite thing, although we did very serious news. We were more loosey-goosey about it, sort of like the news is today, but this was way back then. So I've been around the block, so to speak. I worked at MSNBC. I worked at Court TV. I've covered all sorts of trials. My expertise, even though I worked on Capitol Hill for many years as a radio reporter doing politics, my expertise really is crime and justice. And that's what gets me, you know,
Right.
Stories about the underdogs.
Right. Definitely. Yeah. And all the stories that you reported on that I'm going to talk about today are just that, are crime and justice and those kind of, David and Goliath, really. I mean, if you look at a lot of them, it's kind of like the unsung person that doesn't have a voice versus this juggernaut of a person, whether they're famous or they're filthy rich and they have connections. So you've covered the gamma, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. You know, it's like, the stories that compel me the most are the ones about ordinary people that just got caught up in extraordinary circumstances, and then the media comes in and their life is never the same.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. And one of the first things that pops out definitely on your bio, just in you in general, is the Michael Jackson, right? So correct me if I'm wrong, you're the first one to kind of report on the cases against him, right? Oh my God.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
exactly. Yeah. So can you kind of touch like how the hell did that happen?
Yeah. You know, I worked for Hard Copy here in New York. I live in New York now and have for 20 years. And I had just recently moved out to the California headquarters of Hard Copy. And, you know, you're making sources and you're meeting cops and you're doing the things you do in your beat. And all of a sudden I get a phone call. Hey, from my news director said to me, they're raiding Michael Jackson's apartment in Los Angeles and the ranch in Santa Barbara. Go figure out why. I mean, it was as easy as that.
Wow.
And her office, I went upstairs and spoke to her. I came downstairs and my producer was waving crazy at me from across the room. And he had a source on the phone that said, meet me at a restaurant in Santa Monica. I got something I want to give you, because he, quote, shouldn't get away with it again. So we said, okay, we'll be right there. And I was privy to the child welfare report, the LAPD report. And from there, I have virtually never stopped covering that story. That was 1993. In 2003, I'm already back in New York, but another kid comes forward with more allegations. So I broke that story as well. I was outside Neverland when they were raiding it. Covered the trial in 2005. And then I wrote this book about my many, many years covering the trial and the circumstances and then the trial.
Wow. What's the book called?
It's called Be Careful Who You Love, Inside the Michael Jackson Case. And that, of course, is a lyric from Billie Jean.
Yep.
My mom always told me, be careful who you love.
Wow.
That was pretty.
That's crazy. So,
Yeah.
So it's kind of like I talk to a lot of homicide detectives. I talked to Greg Kading, who did the Biggie and Tupac murders. I talked to a couple other like FBI profiles and stuff like that. And they always tell me, I wondered, I talked about Frank Salerno, who's actually the Hillside Strangler, who you've interviewed, the guy who caught him. So that's the detective who caught him. So they've always told me, I'm like, how do these guys, because Frank Salerno got Hillside Strangler. Right after that, he got Richard Ramirez. And I asked the detectives, I'm like, how the hell, like, one of those cases is like a lifetime. Like that's like a one in a lifetime. And he told me, he's like, well, he was sitting around at dinner and he got a phone call to go in for a particular murder scene. He went in and you don't know that it's that case when you get it. So is it so much in reporting, like you said, like you got this anonymous kind of person just randomly, and you just happen to be the person that was there, that your producer was like, hey, go meet this person?
Yeah, exactly. It's Steve Durant, producer. And actually, I had been in LA not very long, but I had done a bunch of stuff on Heidi Fleiss, the Hollywood Madam. Mm-hmm. That was sort of my inauguration in LA. And so this source that was calling said, I want to talk to that woman who did the Heidi Fleiss story.
Oh.
I'm on the crime beat and I got picked. I just got lucky. I got picked. And then from there, things just exploded in my life. I heard from people who worked at Neverland. I heard from wardrobe people and makeup people and music industry people and people who used to live next door to the Jacksons in Encino, California, and from Gary, Indiana. I mean, I spent all my time sifting through sources that are they real? Are they fake? Do they want to be on TV? Are they asking for money? It was exhausting, but you just follow the lead, like your homicide detective. You get to the scene and then, oh my God, you realize you're dealing with a serial killer.
Right. Yeah. And two things from that is one, it seems everybody I talk to that's had like crazy cases, it like started with like a crazy case like this, it does blow up, and then next thing you know, they're writing books, they're getting on these other big cases, they're on these shows and stuff like that, and that seems to what happened to you. But how does that take a toll on like your life? Because when I talk to homicide detectives and they involve themselves in a Hillside Strangler, a Richard Ramirez, a Notorious B.I.G. and Tupac murder, like it basically, like from all the talks that I've talked to them, it's almost ruined their lives because they're so involved, if that makes sense.
It literally consumes you. Right. And my husband of 30 years is in the same business. He's a radio newsman on the radio and does a lot of voiceover and whatnot. But so he got it. He understood. He saw I don't want to say I was obsessed with it, but I was overwhelmed with it. And you want to do a good job. You want to do a good job on it. Here. And so you study and you work and you follow up every lead. And then my God, 3 years have gone by, right. it does consume you. I have a daughter who was back in New York while I'm in LA getting death threats, and people are vandalizing our home, and people are following me home from hard copy. And I was worried about her. I was really worried about her. She was in college, brand new in college at NYU. And I wanted to warn her, but then I didn't want to scare her. And, so it was a tough time. I'll tell you, there were, you're a big, tough investigative reporter, and then you go home and cry.
Right. Yeah, I can only imagine, because it's especially something like that. You're talking about Michael Jackson, insane allegations, like huge allegations. If not the most famous, performer and artist of all time. It's a lot. There's a lot of weight there.
Well, and not only from his team. I mean, he had private detectives and lawyers and paralegals and whatever, but from the fan base. Right. I would walk outside the door. We were on the Paramount lot in California, and I would walk out of the lot to go to the parking lot across the street to my car, and there would be a gaggle of fans out to get me,
Right.
So it was a little overwhelming. And I have to tell you, honestly, I was sort of baffled by it, because I don't do celebrity reporting. I never did anything on a celebrity before. So to me, I was following a crime, or an alleged crime.
Right.
Ghastly one if it was true. And so I just knew that you wouldn't go and break into a superstar's home unless you had a warrant, which meant a judge had to know what the secret evidence was and approved it, especially for somebody like Michael Jackson and different locations. So I knew there had to be some there.
Right.
You don't just break in and start going through Michael Jackson's house.
Right.
So the facts just take you, and the clues just take you, again, like your homicide detective.
Right.
You're following it, and then you realize you haven't eaten for a couple of days. You get up and again.
Yeah, it's like that's like what's the cliche, like where there's smoke, there's fire type thing. Like that's what always kind of when people say, oh, that's not true about that person, like with R. Kelly. That's just another example of there's only so many times where like 50 plus people can come out and say the same thing and there not be one shred of that to be real, if that makes sense.
It does it entirely. And you know what, I'm going to be honest with you. I got real tired of being called a racist, even back then,
right.
95. And I had calls on the R. Kelly case. A lot of people called me. My daughter is captive. Help me get her out. And I thought to myself, you know what? I am not going after another Black man on charges of pedophilia and enslaving women. And I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. And of course, now you see what's happened with him. He's been found guilty. He's getting set to be sentenced now.
Yep.
And I'm kind of ashamed that I let it go. But at the time, between jobs, and it would have been hard for me to, I didn't have a network behind me at that time. So I justified, I could have done it by myself, but I didn't. And I'm sorry I didn't. That was a good story that needed to be told.
Yeah. And I think to your point, though, I think it was told well by, that Lifetime. First of all, Lifetime, I was like, what the hell? This is great quality and great documentary. That blew the lid off of it for sure. And then his interview, was it with Gail?
Yeah, Gail King. Yes.
That was so incriminating. It's just like
in the Bronco running. It's like, what's happening?
Yeah, it's what it reminded me of. It's very OJ-ish of like, speaking of, you also you were the first person on the scene of that as well, right?
Yeah, boy, you've done your homework on me. Yeah, doing Michael Jackson. That's 93, August 93. That story, and then in June 95. Is that right? I'm still doing Michael Jackson stories. Like every day or 3 times a week. I got another angle. I got another source. I got another interview. And I think it was a weekend. I was off that day and I got a call and they said, go to Brentwood. There's been a murder. O.J. Simpson's wife. I said, okay. So I went, and as I pulled up with my cameraman, the morgue truck was just pulling away. I don't know if it was Nicole Brown Simpson's body or Ron Goldman's body. I don't know. But as we pulled away, we saw this sidewalk leading up to her house and the yellow police tape, but rivulets of blood in the sidewalk, in the pavers, all the way down to the sidewalk, and blood all the way down to the corner at the stop sign. There were like swishes of blood. And I later learned that this was where her dog had gotten out, run through the blood, and then the leash behind him had taken him all the way to the stop sign.
Wow.
So yeah, that was really something. And there was nobody there to stop us. So I said to my cameraman, Chad Mullinex, I said, come on, move the yellow tape. And we opened the door to her little patio area, and you could see where she had fallen. You could see blood drops in these big purple flowers that were by the gate. And as you went in, you could look right into her house, into her living room. It was all glass. There were still burning and pictures of the kids on the mantelpiece. And it was really surreal. It was really surreal.
Wow. How was it? Why was there no one there? Because they just already got the body. They're gone. They didn't keep anyone there.
They took the bodies and put up the tape, and I guess took their photographs. And by the time I got there, the cops' work was done. And silly now, I think about, why isn't anyone hosing off all this blood? Why is it just here, drying in the sun? It was June, it was getting hot. It's funny what you think of later,
Right.
what you remember later about what you were thinking at the time. But there were footprints. You could see footprints in blood. There was a handprint on the side of the wall. I mean, we captured it all. And those were the pieces of video that the public saw for years afterward, even during his trial. We'd read over and over.
Yeah. And that's like what you said, fingerprints and footprints and stuff like that. Like, is that because my personal opinion is, like, growing up, like, that case was like crazy on TV, and like everybody was happy when he got he was found innocent, which
Not
everybody, but for what the news showed, it was like, a lot of people were like, oh yeah, he didn't do whatever. To me, it's like obvious that he was, he did it. And then of course he makes a book afterwards, like, if I did it or whatever, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then
like
but like, as an investigator, like, when you're, I think it was like a sloppy job of like the police department of just not really doing the due diligence because it was OJ.
Well, you make a very good point there. So they took me off Jackson for a while, and I started working OJ,
Right.
and a copy from a source of the police interrogation of OJ. Now, he's just come back from Chicago. They get him in a room. He's got a cut on his hand. He's got, your wife is dead, or your ex-wife. We're going to question you. Well, I think it was about 28 minutes long. We ran the whole thing on the air. And it was Lang and Van Adder were the detectives, seasoned guys, really good guys. I don't want to take anything away from the cops. But like you say, they were pretty deferential to this guy. There was not like, hey, what the hell? What's the cut on your hand? Where the hell were you? Give us a rundown. Give us a time back. There was no tough questions. They were like having a chat with the football star. So that was my first clue. And then I got, I had another source who gave me all of the crime scene photos. And that's like something you never forget when you see the nearly decapitated Nicole Brown Simpson laying there at the spot where you just were.
Right.
And the brutality of it. I mean, probably, because I know you watch crime dramas. This was a crime of passion.
I was just about to say that. Yep.
You don't just stab somebody and run away. This was stabbing and slashing, and it was horrible for both bodies, but Nicole Brown Simpson especially. And the public, I think, got caught up in the Johnny Cochran, if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit drama of it all. And they forgot these two victims.
Right.
You know, people died by somebody's hand, and OJ's Bronco had blood all over it. I rented a Bronco that looked just like his, and we put red masking tape everywhere in the little X's of red masking tape, every place you found blood. And it was stunning how much blood they found in that Bronco. But when you got to trial, everything got all screwy and vague. I just don't think the prosecution did a very good job. They were all over.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think unfortunately, the media, I think, plays a big part, good and bad, when it comes to this stuff and how it's reported and what information is put out there. I mean, I'm not trying to pivot or whatever, but like, it just reminds me of like the opposite happened with like Scott Peterson in my eyes. Right. Because like he
convicted right away.
He was convicted before he even set foot in a courtroom.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's very much like the movie Gone Girl, where it's like, you know, he helped with the searches. He wasn't emotional on camera. He had the girlfriend. He had all these things that, like, yeah, you know, was he a bad husband and she knows why? Yeah, okay, but did he kill her? I don't know. And then the documentary that just came out a year and a half, 2 years ago, blew my mind. I don't know if you saw it. It's called the Murder of Lacey Peterson, and it's like it's like all the information that like was in the trial but was not in the media. Like when I always ask people because everyone knew, like, oh, when Scott Peterson was fleeing the scene, like it looked like he was fleeing, right? He's going to Mexico. He dyed his hair. Mm-hmm. And then you hear the other side of it. You're like, well, he dyed his hair because everyone wanted to kill him, and he didn't want to look like himself. The money that he had was because his mom had asked him to take out like a large amount of money because there was like an error or something. It was definitely like justified of why he did that. And then he was headed to San Diego to go play golf with his brother and his dad, not in Mexico to flee. It's just crazy when you hear them tell that version. You're like, wow, that makes so much sense. But on the news, when Nancy is telling me this guy is running down this, I-10, I'm just like, oh, he's a piece of shit. He killed her. Da, da, da. No question. They don't look at the break-ins in the neighborhood. They don't look at the other pregnant woman found in the bay that was mutilated as well. There's none of that talked about at all. Not saying he's 100% innocent. I don't know. If that information was in the media, I think it would have been a little bit harder. And that's why it reminds me so much of OJ, where it's like the opposite happened. Like the glove. I mean, you see that. And he can't put the glove on. Oh, visually, that's like, there's no way he could have done this.
But that's such theater.
Oh yeah.
I'm remembering now when we're talking about OJ. I found a kid who he came forward, called me up. I went and interviewed him, and he said, "I'm a drug dealer. Okay, I'm a drug dealer." And right before she was killed, OJ called me up because he's one of my regulars. And I got him some stuff. And we went to Burger King and we got a burger, and he took the stuff and ate a burger, and, he was high as a kite. And then I left.
Wow.
So can this be true? I mean, was OJ high as a kite? And whoa. So we took this drug dealer to not one, but two polygraph people. And one of them was Ed Gelb, who is a legend in the polygrapher community.
Right.
And they both said he's telling the truth. So we put it on the air, questioning it. His version, we can't get a comment from the OJ team. Tried to present both sides, and that's my point. I have to tell you, I'm a little embarrassed about my profession. And so you don't see me on TV a lot anymore because it's all so much drama, and it's all such theater, and we talk about gloves instead of both sides of a story. So now I sit at home and I write books. That's what I do. I control that narrative.
Right.
Be it politics, national politics, state politics, crime, brutal crime stories, whatever it is, a narrative gets fixed. Like my former colleague, Nancy Grace, will tell you, the top mom did this terrible thing. Well, wait a minute. We haven't even had a trial yet.
Right.
They're skating. We really don't know what happened, but the narrative gets set, and then it gets repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated, and then it becomes somehow truth.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens.
Again, that's why you don't see me a lot anymore.
Right. Well, it's hard because I mean, now it's like so much. It's not. It's whoever's first versus right. It's whoever puts it out first.
Or who has the more sensational storyline to tell.
True.
Oh, Russiagate, it's Russian disinformation. Well, gee, golly, now we realize it wasn't anything like that.
Right.
We get consumed by these storylines instead of having one place we can go and really say, okay, what really happened with Scott Peterson or OJ or JonBenet Ramsey, or, I could go down a whole list.
Name and insert any controversial major, a crime in the last 30 years. It's every single one of them has it. And it's like, honestly, I think Nancy Grace, like herself, literally, in my opinion, got Scott Peterson convicted just by her every night, just hammering away at this idea of what happened. And then, the evidence either shows it or doesn't, but it doesn't even matter at that point. Like, in my opinion.
And so when the trial comes and these things come out in the trial, the other media doesn't pick it up because
Right.
that doesn't go with the narrative that they've got emblazoned in their mind.
100%.
Yeah, I saw that a lot on the Jackson trial too. And, Casey Anthony, that was another one I covered that for Newsweek and the Daily Beast. Jerry Sandusky, that trial. I love to sit in a courtroom. I don't know. I'm a freak.
Right.
Like, see it all unfold. And I'm fascinated right now with this NBC documentary, The Thing About Pam. I don't know if you watched it, but it's
Pam who?
Pam Hupp, Hupp. But the name of the series, it's, I think, 6 episodes. The Thing About Pam is the name of it. I highly recommend it. Renee Zellweger, the lead character, and she's just unbelievable.
I'll definitely watch it.
Yeah. I don't quite know how it comes out yet because there's only 4 episodes out now, but
true story.
Spoiler alert. Yeah, true story. Spoiler alert. Pam goes to prison. So
somebody's got to go to jail. So, did you ever see the Neverland documentary, the 1 and 2?
Yeah. With the 2 young men.
Yeah. And then they go on Oprah.
Yeah. Yes. And I saw the Oprah thing as well. I wrote this book in 1995 and I wrote about Jimmy and I wrote about, Wade Robson, the 2 young men that you saw in that story. I wrote about them. I knew, but I couldn't say anything because I would go and talk to Wade Robson's mother and she'd call me all sorts of names and tell me to get off the property. I couldn't get the other side of that. So I didn't mention Wade Robson as a potential victim on the air or really in this book. I just told you what they did together, how many nights they slept together. You make up your own mind. I don't come to any conclusions in this book. He was found not guilty.
Yep.
That our system says he was not guilty. But this is my own personal copy of the book. And I have in the back scratched, about 30 names of young boys. I can't, I'd show them to you, but then I'd have to kill you.
Yeah.
And slowly but surely, some of them are coming out. Let me just put it
really?
down. Are coming out. Yeah.
Wow. And you're just like
checking them off.
Right.
So when you come out, what happens? The Jackson team, legal team, even to this day, the estate will attack you. The fans will attack you. I regularly get death threats from, kids writing me from Norway or Ireland or Germany, from the Michael Jackson fan club. So that 5 young men have come forward to say that they were molested by Michael Jackson. And I think in the ensuing years, you might hear from some more. Right. Maybe.
Yeah. And it's like, he died. So it's kind of like, that's another kind of thing where they can, whether it's true or not, it's kind of like, well, he's not around anymore. He can't. It's kind of like goes by the wayside because he's dead, but still,
Yeah,
I don't
to
know.
me, I know this sounds odd, but to me, it's not so much about Michael Jackson. It's about what parents need to know. Red flags parents need to look out for. I'll tell you now, I do believe that Michael Jackson was guilty. I didn't write that. I didn't say that on the air at the time. I didn't write it in the book, but I can come to no other conclusion. And what parents need to know is exactly what Michael Jackson did, which was to seduce the parents first. You have to get the parents' trust first. And then you can get to their children. I have a chapter in here, I think it's chapter 7 or 8, with the man, Ken Lanning is his name, agent from the FBI, who wrote the profile of a pedophile. And that's the first thing he says. They seduce the parents first, they get them to trust them, and then they have free reign with the kids.
Wow.
So, to me, that's why that story was important. When I did the book tour on this, I went on the O'Reilly factor.
Oh God.
Riley, who I knew barely, but I knew the guy. I sat down and the first question was, he said, why do we care about Michael Jackson? And that was my answer. We should care because it could happen to your kid and you need to know the warning signs.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great point. The one thing that stuck out to me in that documentary was, for one, the detail that these guys were going into. I was like, there's no way that you could just make this stuff up. But the one but the one thing that they said was the bell system. Like I was like, wow, that's like genius.
Yep. On the master bedroom.
Yeah, it's like he knew it basically would warn him and let him know that someone was coming down the hall through the other room, and he would know to either stop or whatever. Like, I don't know. I feel like that's like, you would remember that as a kid if that happened to you, if that makes sense.
And I know the layout of Neverland. There was a long hallway down to his bedroom. So at the first motion, at the end of the long hallway, this alarm, bells would go off. Yep. And you would know somebody is coming down this long hallway with food or drink or, whatever.
Still. Yep. Yeah. That caught me. I was like, because I was like, oh, whatever. And then I saw that and I was like, holy shit, like that's extremely detailed.
What stuck with me was, Wade Robson, the taller, larger fellow, the choreographer, he had been in a lot of therapy. And he seemed to be dealing with it better. I saw a little bit of underlying anger. Remember, I saw this as a little kid. I saw him as a little.
That's true, yeah.
But Jimmy Safechuck, to me, seemed like such a damaged young man. I was so glad to see that he had such a strong, wonderful, supportive wife. His face was just full of agony to me when he was describing how Michael Jackson gave him a wedding ring and he get, all these, like you say, the details. I hope since that documentary, I hope he's gotten that kind of therapeutic help too, to get over this. So, it wasn't your fault, kid.
Right. Yeah, no, and it never is. And that's something that's important for people to know for sure. And, hold on, let me see. You brought up Sandusky. I was living in Pennsylvania when that happened.
Oh,
that was crazy because it was like Penn State is like the holy grail in that state. So everybody that goes there, they could do no wrong. And then they had like this, I also sometimes can put on my tinfoil hat, my conspiracy hat a little bit sometimes. But, when you find out that Sandusky had like ties to these foundations with children and, these
started them. Yeah.
He had them. So he just basically had like a funnel of new kids and stuff like that. And that really was like, damn. And then I think Paterno, whatever his name is, I think he died because of the stress. Like,
I do too. I think he demised early, as they say. Yeah, that's another thing that Ken Lanning, the profiler from the FBI for pedophiles, told me, that that's another thing. They seduce the parents and then they surround themselves things that kids are going to love.
Right.
You know, a foundation, a swimming club. Sandusky had in his basement, we heard during the trial, he had this whole game room down there with a big water bed and hockey, air hockey, darts, and, you know, all the video.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Wow.
And who testified. And there were many more in the wings that they were going to bring forward if something happened in this trial. They had a whole nother set of kids ready and available. The prosecutor told me, but this one kid said he was downstairs being sexually attacked and he was calling to Mrs. Sandusky upstairs for help. And he knew she was there because he could hear her in the kitchen, and no help came.
Did she know about it?
She says she did not. She was in the courtroom every day, very supportive of him. Their church people were there. There was a whole group of people that said this cannot possibly be correct. Wow. And then we heard a voice, and it sure sounded like it was correct.
Right.
And
yeah, they threw the book at him. Right.
Yeah,
they
sure did. And he tried to get a retrial and failed.
Yeah. He'll never. Hopefully, I don't think he'll ever see the light of day. But yeah, that was a crazy time, which kind of like is a good segue to where I actually saw you more recently. I was watching the Epstein documentary. Was it Who Killed Epstein? And I saw you, and I was like, okay, like I've been obsessed with this. I've known about Epstein. I mean, I like before he killed himself and all that stuff. I was like, this guy's always been like a weird individual and kind of like sketchy. I was not surprised. But what are your thoughts on that side? Because I did, before you answer, I talked to Chris Mogg, who is a reporter for the New York Post or something a couple of weeks ago. He was also in the documentary. Very briefly, he did a lot of the research on the Lolita Express, like his plane. So then we went down a rabbit hole of like, he's like, he thought that Epstein's life was more fascinating than him killing himself because of all the things, you know, how he got his money from Lex. And it was more fascinating than his death. Right. So what are your kind of thoughts on Epstein? And obviously I'm going to ask you if you think he killed himself. But, you know, from him getting, you know, a slap on the wrist in 2005 from the prosecutor that ended up being the attorney general, you know, which is crazy. I've never seen.
You just can't make it up.
Can't. It's crazy.
But, you know, I agree with Chris. The lifestyle that this man came from, I mean, he was like a chubby little Jewish kid living out on Long Island, you know?
Yep.
And then he worked his way into being, but brilliant, especially in math and science. He was brilliant. He probably never got laid as a kid.
Yep.
I mean, I hate to be crude, but, you know, he was fat and chubby and greasy hair, but he was smart. And he weaseled his way in, I think, without even graduating from college, into being a teacher at this really, really prestigious prep school on the east side of Manhattan, where he meets the parents, the fathers, the rich Wall Street fathers of all these students the students loved him, by the way. So that's what catapults him into this extra stratosphere. He's no longer the Long Island kid, you know, pudgy kid going to Coney on the weekend. Now he's in high society, so to speak. I'm really glossing over this quickly, but then here comes Ghislaine Maxwell from the UK with her beautiful British accent and her stylish clothes, and she knows the Queen and she knows all sorts of things. Well, this is a perfect match for him because this can catapult him into yet another stratosphere. And I am fascinated about who he surrounded himself with, why they were so loyal to him, why they gave him so much money to handle, from Dershowitz to Clinton to Wexler, what is it, Victoria's Secret. He owned Victoria's Secret. So Epstein decided to call girls in and have them parade in their underwear in front of him because he maybe can get them to be a Victoria's Secret model.
Wow.
So he had things. He had his daily massages, and he had the Lolita Express, and he had an island, and he had a place in New Mexico and France. And I'm fascinated how he got so much money so quickly, and it just kept growing and growing and growing. Right. And that's what everybody looked at. They saw the pretty girls around him. Anybody who went to that island or to his townhouse in Manhattan. So what the heck? Who are all these young nymphs around in their bathing suits in Miami or in Palm Beach? So people knew, but it's like Michael Jackson. Everybody saw him. He was always with children, but he's a rich, eccentric guy. And so now we have to turn it around on ourselves. We see all this stuff, but we don't stop and question it. We let the money cloud our vision and our opinion. He's just an eccentric guy. No, he was paying 14, 15, 16-year-old girls to come to his house and masturbate him and giving them $100 because they were from poor families. Was exploiting young girls. I mean, if he could, there's a story that he got 12-year-old twins from France gifted to him for his birthday at one, flown over by a fashion designer friend of his, for the weekend. Here's your birthday present to 12-year-olds.
Wow.
It comes back to, what do we in society, what are we most impressed with? The wealth and the planes and the islands, or do we really look past all that to the character of people?
Right.
In Epstein's case, I'll tell you, high society here in New York City was blinded by the guy.
What you said about Epstein is 100% true. Like his life, how he got his money. I mean, I think Les Wexler gave him that like, I don't even know how many millions of dollars of that townhome for $1.
Yeah.
Like he infiltrated like so many people in high society. What got me though was like Gates, all these like the richest people in the world are giving this guy, like you said, who was a college dropout, never really amounted to anything in his younger years, all this money to use or to invest in and manage and all that stuff. But it's like they have access to the best people on the planet. Why would they use him?
And then he went to these august institutions, and I think I have this right. I'm not sure. Yale, Harvard. Yep. And they said, oh yeah, you're going to donate how much money to our scientific program? Come on in.
Right.
And so, once he got into that level of society and got money paved the way. Right. There was no place he couldn't go. And don't forget, he had this mystique about him. He wasn't a very tall man, but he had this steely eye. He was handsome. He, for being a chubby little kid out in Long Island, I thought he was a pretty attractive man. Right. And so you put the whole package together, and he's got jets and limos and mansions and ranches, and, wow, who could resist?
Right. Well, first, I'm going to ask you what you think really happened. Like, do you think that someone who is about to unload some of the most powerful people on the planet against the government, who is on suicide watch in a prison in New York that was underfunded, the security guards were not the best quality, they were sleeping, and blah, 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 blah. Do you think that he truly killed himself?
I think real chance of it. But I can also see where it could have been a contracted hit. When you look at the photographs, as you saw in that documentary in which I appeared, mm-hmm. There are orange sheets all over the place. That's weird. How come one inmate has all these different sheets? One of which, of course, was used to strangle him by tying it to the top bunk, and then he bent down on his knees, they say, until he strangled himself. I got a problem with that theory, because your body will make you faint before you can literally break your own neck. And so then I go back to this idea that the cameras in the hallway leading up to his cell suddenly didn't work. The two guards that were sitting outside were either asleep or on the internet shopping. They didn't bother to check on him as they said they did because they checked it off on the list.
Mm-hmm.
But that was phony. He had been under suicide watch, and then all of a sudden he wasn't under suicide watch. And there was this former cellmate of his that was so muscle bound. I mean, he could have taken me and snapped my neck in an instant.
A cop.
And I'm about the former cop. I'm about the same size. I'm 5'6". Snap your neck. Right. And then walk out because, the guards got some overtime and the cameras were turned off. And so I can see both of them happening, frankly. I think that Epstein was a little like G. Gordon Liddy or Anthony Pellicano, the PI to the stars out in Hollywood. They had this omerta about them. I'm loyal. I'm never going to say a word. I'm not going to turn on my friends. That sort of loyalty baked into their system. So I can't really see that Epstein would ever open up his black book and say, okay, here are the guys that did the young girls with me. Mm-hmm. But I can see how some of the guys in that book might think he did.
Right. Yeah.
Money talks everywhere. And that the tombs down there where they hold the prisoners it's not as bad as Rikers, but it's a hellhole. Yeah. And you can probably buy yourself just about anything in that building.
Right. Would you want to know what I think?
Question. You notice that?
What's that?
I'm not really answering your question.
Yeah, no, you're dancing around, which is totally fine. But so do you want to know what I think?
Yes, please. Okay. What do you think?
I personally think this is where my tinfoil hat comes in. Mm-hmm. I think that they faked his death because he is so valuable to the case. And it's funny because I'm not a Trumper. I'm not a Trump fan. I'm like more of a independent type person. But right. So when Trump came into office, there was never like the child trafficking and human trafficking stuff was never really on the radar. And then as soon as he came into office, it really started to pick up. And there was cases all over the country, huge busts. And then Epstein comes into play. And I personally think that Epstein had a big part in that and was working with the government for a while. And then he, suicided because he's too valuable. And they know that the people in that book are extremely powerful and 100% could get to him. And they have, maybe have him in hiding or something, or I think he's an informant for sure. And I think he's alive. And I think that's why Ghislaine was able to get captured and she was prosecuted and found guilty. Mm-hmm. And I think that more will come in the future, but I don't know.
That's a fascinating theory. Right. I mean, the U.S. Marshals were busting child sex trafficking rings right and left, yep. Florida, Oklahoma, all over the place. The FBI was doing. That's fascinating. Yeah. With the tinfoil hat theory, though, isn't it?
It is kind of like they had to fake his death and blah, 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 blah. And that's.
I mean, did him plastic surgery and put him in witness protection somewhere?
They totally could do that. To think that the U.S. government couldn't be capable of that, I think is ridiculous. They totally could do that.
Maybe he's still out on that island that nobody can get on, but you got to get a boat to get there. And that, I'd never thought of that. That's I'm glad I asked you.
It is interesting. And it's kind of like it is kind of crazy, but at the same time, it's like, do you think that like, as much as Trump is a ridiculous person, he's also smart in certain ways, right? So not that he would have the masterful plan of like keeping him alive and all this stuff, but I think if people really wanted to get into the inner circles of those, was it Prince Andrew or whatever? I mean, these people are like untouchable. The Clintons. I mean, I have friends that I've known for almost 30 years that I've barely gone on vacation with, let alone flown on a plane with. And you're telling me that Bill Clinton doesn't like Epstein or didn't know him that well now, but you flew to his island and on his private plane over 20 times. Like,
And why would he
right,
do that? Go bake in the sun somewhere? Come on, you
right.
go out for that. No, I agree with what you're saying about his untouchability. But you know what, too? I'll just play devil's advocate. Once you're in prison and you see what life is like there, and you can't sleep at night because everybody's screaming and they leave the lights on and you can't sleep and you can't, things get pretty depressing.
True.
And there are a lot of suicides in prison. So I kind of like your theory. There's that one photo of Epstein on the stretcher coming out dead.
Years. Yeah.
Pictures, of ligature marks on his throat and whatnot. But come to think of it, I never heard about a funeral. I never heard about him being cremated. I never heard what they did with the body.
Nothing. Yep. Nothing. It's like like Osama bin Laden. I talked to a couple of Navy SEALs and stuff like that on here. And I always ask them, I'm like, they threw him over the ocean because that was like the proper burial that they would get. And I'm just like, I mean, not that they would put a picture of Osama bin Laden's dead body across the internet and show us that he is dead. And it just reminded me very much of like, I mean, okay, you got that one side shot of him on the gurney, and that is it.
Yeah,
that is it. There's nothing.
It does look like a postmortem face, I must admit, because that doesn't even look like him. Look at his face, but your face falls, your skin falls away from your bones when you're dead. Yep. I'm going to be thinking about this long up here. Topic.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's something that you can go down a rabbit hole with, because it's like and the other thing I asked Chris, the guy that was in the documentary that you were in, I personally, there was so much media coverage when Epstein was on trial, or not on trial, but when he was about to go on trial and all that stuff. And then when Ghislaine gets arrested, there's like, to me, I felt like there was not an equal amount, and she got convicted of 5 of 6 of those counts. So it's like, I mean, and then Chris was like, "Oh no, there was a ton of coverage." I'm like, was there though? Like, there wasn't really as much as there was for Epstein, I thought, and she was actually convicted.
Yeah. No, I think there was more coverage of Epstein. I agree with that. But, I'm just a news freak. So I was all Ghislaine, whatever. I have a really good friend who's a courtroom artist. And of course, in New York courts, you can't take a camera. So I was talking to Elizabeth. Okay, what's she really like?
Wow.
So I was all about that.
Right. Yeah. And I heard like in prison, like you said, like prison sucks. And like in prison, she was like really struggling because she couldn't get this, she couldn't get that, she couldn't sleep, she couldn't eat, and blah, 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 blah. So it's like,
couldn't get any beauty rest. Yeah.
Right. Yep. Couldn't get her spa days and stuff. And I'm just like, I mean, come on, you're
There's no,
no. Oh man. Okay, cool. All right. Well, I'm glad we talked about that. There's real quick, just one question about JonBenet Ramsey. That case has fascinated me for as long as I've known about it. As I was when I was a kid, I was like, oh wow, like this, so mysterious. And then I think there was like a documentary probably like 5 or 7 years ago that I watched, and they really focused on the brother. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that case? Because they still haven't yet to figure that. Was it the parents? Was it the brother? And then the parents helped cover it up. And
that was one of the last cases I covered for hard copy. They sent me to Boulder, Colorado, and they said, figure it out. Well, wow. Okay, I'll just figure it out. There was a very, it was swarming with media, first of all, and it was a very closed community. Nobody was going to talk about, oh, no, no comment. Doors would slam.
Right.
And it was impossible to get anything. And the DA was weird, and the cops were secretive, and you couldn't get anything. And my boss at Hard Copy, who was new to, she was a new boss, screamed and yelled at me. I'll tell you what you do. You follow that little brother home from school and get on him. And I thought, you know what? I am done. And that's when I quit. I quit after 7 years. I left hard copy. I called my agent and I said, look, get me out of here. I can't, I'm not going to go and follow a little fourth grader or whatever. What was his first name? I'm forgetting. Brett.
I think it was Brett, or it was a B, I think.
But I was not going to do that. I'm a mother. I wouldn't want somebody doing that to my child. And you know what I did? I've never admitted this publicly. I listened to the screaming. I said, yes, ma'am. I hung up and I went to the movies.
Do you know what you watched?
I went and watched like 2 or 3 movies in a movie theater. And my cameraman, nobody knew where I was. I just said, that's it.
Wow.
I can't anymore. But back to your question. My constitutionally protected opinion is that when you can't figure out something and find the one thing that explains it all, that's your, and that younger brother, if he was involved in killing his sister, explains everything. It explains why maybe Patsy wrote the ransom note to cover it up. It explains why they hired a criminal defense attorney right away. It explains why after a while they took that young son and they sent him off to a family in Georgia to get him out of there. It explains a lot. You know, Mr. Ramsey had already lost a daughter, an adult daughter from another marriage, to a car accident, as I recall. And JonBenet is dead. And so they have one adult son in college and this other one. And this other one, gads, I wish I could remember his name. Burke, thank you. Burke had allegedly already attacked JonBenet in younger days with a golf club bang to the head. So, because he was mad about something. He when you saw him on Dr. Phil speaking, you thought to yourself, I thought to myself, this is a kid on the spectrum.
Right.
You know, I'm not saying he's stupid. I'm just saying that he was not, he's socially awkward.
Yeah.
So to me, again, my opinion, because that family is very litigious, but I am entitled to my own opinion. I think saying that Burke killed his sister and maybe rolled her up in a rug, or maybe the parents rolled her up in a rug to hide her, whatever, explains everything.
That's a good
logical conclusion in my.
I like the thought process of like how you said, like if even though it can't be proven or anything like that, like if there's that one piece and you fit that in there, but it solves everything. Yeah,
the puzzle is complete with that. My husband is very wise. He once said to me, when there's a whole lot of things wrong with something, there's really only one thing wrong.
Right.
And I remembered that. So what's the one thing that makes all the JonBenet puzzle pieces come together? It's little brother Burke.
Right. Yep. No, that's I've actually never thought of it. But because when you think of like, you could apply that to any of these cases that have those kind of like those standouts that you could just plug in. You're like, this would literally solve all of it. Granted, you need evidence to obviously with that, but I like that. I'm gonna steal that. So
your homicide detectives do too. Okay, here's what I got. Here are the puzzle pieces. What's the centerpiece? What brings it all together?
Right.
What makes? And sometimes you never find that puzzle piece, and sometimes you think you find it, but you can't prove it.
Right.
You know, that's where I am on JonBenet Ramsey.
Right. I love that. That's great. Okay, 2 more things, and I'll let you get out of here. Okay. So you interviewed James Earl Ray.
Yes, they did.
Who assassinated, air quotes, Martin Luther King. Right. Of all of the assassinations and conspiracies that I have thought about, Martin Luther King is one that stands out to me. That is next to JFK as far as like mafia being involved and, you know, all that stuff. What was he like, for one? And did he kind of indulge in anything else that was kind of like not straightforward, like, oh, I just didn't like him, so I killed him.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I have to tell you, that was the worst interview I ever did.
What?
It was the worst interview I ever did, and it wasn't my fault. He couldn't get sense out. He couldn't explain, and he blinked all the time. He blinked like this, he was just blinking, blinking, blinking. And I'm a body language watcher.
Right.
If talking to you and they're telling you something and they keep looking away, they're probably lying.
Right.
Well, that's what he did the whole time, and he squirmed and he swizzed. And I thought to myself, this is like a man who's been an alcoholic for too many years, and he just couldn't focus, and he couldn't even really give you one quote that he gave me that would answer your second question about what did he say. He just kept saying, that's the wrong question to ask. Well, okay, let me ask you point blank. Did you kill Martin Luther King? That's the wrong question to ask. You see, there was this guy named Raul who came to town and told me. It was crazy.
Wow.
Couldn't hardly follow what he was saying because he was so intellectually disabled.
Wow. That's crazy. I never knew that.
Yeah, that's my honest opinion. My cameraman, Lewis Bailey, what a piece of work that guy was. I love that guy. They brought James Earl Ray. You can't just walk through a prison.
No.
Mountain State Prison in Tennessee, right? This isn't. This is a bad one. So I said, well, I need some B-roll of your inmate. Well, they let him walk across the courtyard to us. We're in a glassed-in room, and so we shot a picture of him walking. And then he came in, and he was squirrely. He was distracted. He was, I don't know. But he spotted Lewis Bailey, and he said, "Hey, Lewis, how are you?" So when the whole interview was over, and I just kept trying to pull something out of him. I looked at Lewis and I said, what the heck? He greeted you like your old friends. He said, "Oh yeah, I was here 2 or 3 days ago with Geraldo Rivera. We did the same kind of interview. It was awful."
Oh my God.
So it wasn't just me. It was James Earl Ray. He was indecipherable in what he said.
Interesting.
I want you, but that was it.
No. See, now my conspiracy mind goes like, I wonder if he was brainwashed to be like that. Ha ha.
Or maybe so stupid. Sorry, but maybe so intellectually disabled that he was an easy pawn for somebody else to use to do what he did. I just got no feeling at all.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Lewis, for the heads up. If you just went there with Geraldo.
But that was a good thing because you don't want a cameraman who talks out of school.
True.
But he knew Geraldo, so
That's too funny. All right, last thing about let's talk about the Free Britney and what you've been writing about since 2015.
Oh, yes.
And then your new book that you got coming out.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
I have covered so many of these cases, crime, murder, serial killers, whatever. I am, as I said at the top, always interested in victims.
Right.
And I found a flaw in the court system, which others have found before me, but the public doesn't pay attention to. And I want them to pay attention to it now. And it's called the guardianship conservatorship system. It is what happened to Britney Spears. Now, Britney Spears was shaving her head and beating paparazzi with umbrellas and doing drugs, and she needed help, obviously.
Right.
But 13 years, 14 years, she's earning millions and millions of dollars in tours all over the world, and she's still under conservatorship. So that is the story that finally woke up the public. And as you say, I've been covering this story since 2012 was the first one I heard about. 2015, I finally found evidence that I could start writing about it. And it's a system that allows the court to sort of willy-nilly say, you're incapacitated. So put this guardian in charge of you and this your person and this conservator in charge of your estate, and you're going to do exactly what they say, and you have no more civil rights. And when I first started covering the story, it was all about the elderly. You know, you work hard all your life, you make a little nest egg, and then somebody comes in and takes it away from you, takes rights away, and then they say they're protecting you while they pay themselves out of your money. And now you need a housekeeper or a driver or a something, you know, a messenger service. Well, you pay for that because the guardian hired them for you. Well, you don't want a chef in your kitchen, but the guardian hired that chef. So your estate has to pay for it. So at first it was just elderly people, and I could not get my publisher at the time. Well, this book I've written, this is my fourth book now, but Simon & Schuster wasn't interested. No, it's about old people. Nah. But over the years, Corey, I have discovered that the target group isn't just elderly anymore. It's people like Britney Spears and Amanda Bynes and people, young people who have inherited money from their grandpa. Or there's a case, a young man out in Staten Island who was born, he had a birth defect at birth because of a medical malpractice. He got $1.9 million. Well, the court says, you got all this money, we're going to give you a guardian until you're 18. Well, when you turned 18, the guardian didn't want to give it up and kept petitioning the court to continue to be the guardian and get the fees and deplete this poor young man who has a mild form of cerebral palsy to deplete his estate.
Wow. Well,
he has cerebral palsy. He's not stupid. You know, cerebral palsy affects your motor skills, not your intellect.
Right.
The targeted group now is young people, people who want a workman's compensation case. I've found, this was astounding to me, that divorce attorneys in contested divorces are now telling husbands, let's just guardianize your soon-to-be ex-wife. Then she'll have no more civil rights. She can't vote, hire a lawyer, travel, go to church, vote, and she can't do anything. And then we'll get you your divorce. The judge will give you a divorce on her behalf.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So this is what I'm writing about. The book is called The Racket, as in a mafia-styled RICO racket. And it frankly involves $50 billion in assets every single year. That's the number of assets that travel from people's estates outward.
What?
It's supposed to be heirs. You know, your grandfather wants you to have his money.
Right. But
he declares grandpa's incapacitated, and they take the money because they're the guardian.
Wow.
So you'll be fascinated, I think. I'd love to come back and talk to you more about it.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I have a question or two about that, because I never knew about it until I saw Free Britney. And then I was like, wow, like she was like kind of like, seemed like she was, you know, losing her marbles a little bit. But I found it fascinating how hard it was to get out of it for her.
Exactly. And for everybody. I mean, I can count, I've investigated thousands of cases, and I can count on these hands how many people actually got out.
What?
Yeah. Once you're in, you're in. You can have a car accident, have a brain trauma. They put you under guardianship, but then you get better. Well, good luck getting off guardianship.
Why is it so hard?
Because it involves judges and lawyers and guardians that have this cottage industry that all work together. And the only way they make money, not the judges, because taxpayers pay them, the only way they make money is from these wards. So who's going to tattle about bad behavior or overbilling or, you know, taking my cerebral palsy kid and putting him in a hospital because you think he's having a rough time, and then you over medicate him to the point of coma.
Wow.
These guardians and conservators have astounding amounts of power. And well, you heard it from Britney. She couldn't even have a baby. She couldn't even get married. She couldn't have a boyfriend drive her in his car to go get a Starbucks.
That's crazy.
That's how completely confining it is. And it just, again, I go for underdog stories, and this one, I found thousands of them. 1.3 million people are under guardianship right now in the United States.
Wow.
Some people need it. I mean, some people just need it. They have dementia, they're paralyzed, in a coma, they're whatever it is.
Right.
But we don't even know if that number's right, because nobody, not one state, not one federal entity keeps track of how many people have their rights taken away by guardianship.
Wow.
Nope.
That's crazy. Well, I mean, it makes that just sounds like your book is a perfect name for it. That sounds like a huge kind of racket. Like, oh my God.
And I hope I'm describing it well enough here that you make you think, oh my God, could that happen to my mom, my dad, to me? You know, a lot of times it's family. You know, I don't know your circumstance, but say you have a widowed mother, you have brothers and sisters. What do we do with mom? We can't figure it out. And the siblings start fighting, maybe rivalries kick in. And one person goes to a lawyer, say an elder law lawyer or an estate lawyer. And that lawyer will say, I have the perfect way to solve your problem. It's called guardianship. We'll take you to court. You'll get guardianship over your mom. Is that what you want? Okay, great. Oh, you don't? Oh, well, we'll get you a private guardian then. The judge will appoint a professional. Okay. So they get to court, and the brother or sister who started this action says, good, I'm going to be the guardian. Well, no, that's not what usually happens. Sometimes it happens, but the judge can say, you know, there's a lot of dysfunction in your family. I don't think I should name you. I'm going to name this professional over here. Well, that's one of the judge's favorites.
Oh.
In his court all the time. That person probably has 100 wards. I found guardians that had 400 wards all at one time. And
wards are people.
But yeah, wards of the court. Once you're incapacitated, you're named the ward of the court. So one person service 100 wards at the same time, or 400. There's one in Florida. I got to tell you this quick story. There's one in Florida who's about to go on trial. Her name is Rebecca Farrelly, and she had so many wards all over the state of Florida. Now that's a big state, you know, how, you know, all those different counties. Well, she would put do not resuscitate orders on the ones that were in the hospital because, you know, I got plenty. I just do not resuscitate. Well, he picked the wrong person. There was a military man named Stephen Stryker. He had a swallowing problem. And she put a do not resuscitate against the wishes of his daughter and himself. She put a DNR on, and then she ordered that his feeding tube be capped. And the hospital staff stood by and watched this man die slowly for a week.
What?
They finally caught up with her. She has been indicted. She is awaiting trial now on many, many, many charges. She overbilled Medicare. She did this, she did that. There's all sorts of allegations.
Oh my God.
So that's how bad it can get.
That's crazy. There's a movie that just came out about a year ago.
I Care a Lot.
I Care a Lot. Yeah. That's this same thing.
That Rosamund Pike, the actress there, just captured the viciousness of predatory guardians. And again, some guardians are great,
right? But
the predatory guardian, she just captured that character so well. And then of course the movie went off on this weird,
it did,
Hollywood thread about a midget and the drug dealers, and it was crazy. But that character was labeled after or fashioned after a guardian from Nevada. Her name is Parks. And April Parks did horrible things to people. And she got, if I'm remembering right, 18 to 40 years. She's in prison right now.
Damn.
Yeah. You want to know how mean she was? When they arrested her, put her in prison. Somebody bid on her storage unit because the bill hadn't been paid. And the guy went in and he found crematory urns of 27 people. So her wards would die. She would cremate them. She would put them in an urn and throw them, literally throw them into this storage unit. She didn't bother to send the ashes in a dignified way to the families.
Wow.
Or to even tell the families that their person had died. She just threw them in a storage unit.
Like
That's
nothing.
all.
Yeah. Wow. What a piece of shit. I just Googled her. Yeah. Guardianship ringleader behind bars.
It hurts.
That's
She's
crazy.
a Cadillac-y looking woman. But
Yeah.
so
Wow.
public starting to learn about guardianship. I hope my book will not only show them the depths of the depravity of it, but also give them some good tips on how to avoid it in their own family.
Right. Well, yeah, I look forward to it. I'll definitely. When's it coming out?
Well, it's Brandeis University Press, and my manuscript is due in May. So pretty soon, probably fall, I would guess.
Cool. All right. Well, I'll keep a lookout on that. And like you said, I'd love to have you back whenever it comes out and talk more about that. Cause I feel like we just scratch the surface.
Really? I feel like I've been talking way too much.
Oh, no. I feel, oh my God, I have like, so you've, opened Pandora's box now with everything. So, but
Your tinfoil conspiracy stories. So
I'll shoot you some ideas through text, but
I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dan. I appreciate it. And that's another episode for the E4 Explicit podcast. We'll see you next time.